Hey everybody, Ryan and Don here with Roll for Initiative. We want to give you another review of a supplemental source book. This one is an alternate races source book all about playing undead characters. It's written by Matt Gravelyn and you can find it on the DM's Guild.
So the source book has 4 different alternative races that your player characters can play. There is the Bound Spirit, Vampire, Specter, and the Soulless.
What's kind of cool about it is it calls them races for the purpose of like the racial traits and your stats and all that kind of thing. But you can absolutely play this as any race, any base race that the undead's coming back as.
Yeah, effectively when your player character dies and comes back as one of these races, you take any of the racial traits that the previous alive character had and then substitute in these new racial attributes and bonuses.
So the 2 of the races that I want to talk about are the Vampire and the Specter. First of all, I really liked the Specter. I think it's an interesting one. Essentially, it's a ghost, and it doesn't exist on the prime material plane. You can see it, it can move around. It is a player character, but it can't interact with things physically. It exists on the astral plane, and some of its abilities let it sort of split its time between the 2, and that does make for some interesting moments where other players or other NPCs or monsters that are on both the material plane and the astral plane, if they are dual-natured, then your Spectre really has a chance to interact with them and do some stuff. I like this one. It reminds me a lot of, in the movie Vampire Hunter D Bloodlines, there's this really weak character that lives in hospice, essentially, but can turn into this super powerful ghost. It can't do much, but what it can, it's a glass cannon, really. And it just has that vibe to me. I played a character sort of like that in a homebrew Shadowrun when I was in undergrad. It didn't last very long, but it was really fun roleplay-wise. And that's sort of the overall thing that I have for this supplement. My overall review of this supplement is it gives you lots of ideas, either as a player or a GM, for role play, but it's not quite as in-depth as some of the other supplements that Matt's put out.
So the Bound Spirit is actually the first one that's listed in the source book. So effectively you are creating a golem. The spirit of the previous character is bound to a physical created body, either wood, metal, stone, clay, whatever it is. And so this ups your stats. I found it really interesting that because the spirit is bound to this physical body that is probably going to last a lot longer than a normal humanoid body, depending on what material you're made out of, can affect how long that new player character is alive. Like a metal bound spirit is going to last a lot longer than a wooden. But this also affects how you heal. You can't heal through like magic or stuff like that. You have to effectively go and repair the body, which I found a really interesting and nice kind of balance to it.
And again, this is one of those moments that there are some rules that are plugged into this supplement, but really for me it's role play. It's the sort of thing where, well, instead of visiting the temple, you also swing by a blacksmith or something like that. And maybe as a DM you decide, well, not every city has a blacksmith that's able to or willing to work on this strange creation. Also, as a GM, you could probably pretty easily come up with an expensive one-time use repair kit that functions a lot like a healing potion. The supplement's a really cool in-depth exploration for creatures that are kind of nothing more than a stat block and some short descriptions in the monster manual, and then how can you play that as a character or as a really cool NPC.
And another thing the source book points out is that a lot of these new races, the character might be tempted to seek out individuals from their past, but for those individuals, meeting something that, this metal construct that now is claiming it's their dead loved one is going to be scary and traumatic, and depending on what the cultural ideas about death and rebirth and stuff like that are, they very likely could be shunned from their previous life.
Which sounds really cool if you're playing these characters from the very beginning. If this happens to a 5th, 6th, 9th, 10th level character, a lot of those relationships are probably already established, and so it might be more difficult or less impactful depending how the GM runs things. You know, there's a lot of room to take inspiration from what it is in this book. As opposed to some hard and fast rules, this is how the world and this is how the society is going to look like the Canatars or something like that we've talked about in the past. The vampires in this book are interesting. To me, they're sort of just a watered-down version of the vampire from the Monster Manual, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that also means that if you're running a horror-themed campaign, or if you're picking things up before or after the Ravenloft adventure books, you just want to run a game in that world, this allows the opportunity for vampires to be maybe a little bit more balanced of a creature in your world. I think as a player, sometimes it's tough or even annoying for the GM and other players to contract vampirism because you become a lot more powerful. And it's harder to balance things. This could potentially be a way to have that be a little more balanced, or even after a particularly rough run of Ravenloft, maybe your players are now a vampire coven, and that might be an interesting way. Either they're succumbing to it, or they're embracing it, they're fighting against it, and the book talks about that as well.
And the last one is the Soulless. So this is a character who has come back alive, but their soul is no longer there. Whether that is they made a deal with like a devil and their soul is gone, or there was some magical accident. The sourcebook gives a couple ideas of how it could happen, but effectively you come back as the Soulless, and this race is much more, I think, roleplay, because all of the traits give you benefits to like your charisma and deception and performance, because the idea is that like, well, you are disconnected from what it is to be a human, so you are mimicking emotion and stuff like that, and
basically you become a sociopath.
Yeah.
You have no social interaction, you have no emotions, and you're pretty good at faking it.
Yeah. I think this one for me is the weakest of all of them. It didn't make sense as much to me, and
at least as a race.
Yeah. But I could see some applications for it.
Yeah, overall, this sourcebook kind of felt like some really cool player ideas that Matt's had or his friends have had in some past campaigns, and they got jotted down into a supplement. With that said, I still think it's a buy, especially if you're a GM that really likes horror settings, or if you're a player that really wants to have something that's a little bit off the wall. And it's 99 cents on DM's Guild. I think $1 is worth it for the inspiration that this one gives you. Even if, in my opinion, it's not as in-depth or fleshed out as some of the other work that's out there.
So thanks for watching. Have you checked out this source book or any other source books for Undead Races? Let us know what you thought about them down below. We want to give a special thanks to all of our patrons, especially Sean, Joan, Lainey, Arby, and Bryce. If you're interested in becoming a patron and picking up some cool perks and supporting us, you can head over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative.
If this is your first time, then thanks a whole lot. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can hit the bell and get notifications every time our new video comes back, or just join us every Tuesday and Thursday, which is what our regular release schedule is.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative.
Bye.
Bye.
You got T-Rex.
Yeah.